The beer store says it's going to be shutting down even more locations across the province, including up here in the GTA. 6 stores will close at the end of business day. This is going to be on November 2nd. They include locations in Mississauga and Pickering.
Buying beer and wine in Ontario could soon become more difficult. In January, new rules that require retailers to offer deposit return systems for alcohol containers comes into effect.
Another Ontario beer store is closing. This time it's South River. But this isn't just about one small town losing a storefront. It's about an entire province watching a system collapse in real time. For decades, Ontario's beer store wasn't just a place to buy a six-pack. It was the backbone of a billion-dollar recycling program, the anchor for good union jobs, and a predictable constant in communities big and small. Now, the closures are accelerating. From northern Ontario to Toronto suburbs, the shutdowns are spreading like wildfire. And here's the kicker. The government insists grocery and convenience stores can fill the gap. But those grocers aren't ready. They don't have the staff, the space, or the logistics to take billions of empties. This isn't just a transition, it's chaos in motion. Stay tuned, like and subscribe, and keep watching. Ontario thought it was modernizing its alcohol system. Instead, it detonated the very foundation of how beer has been sold, recycled, and consumed for nearly a century. The South River closure was just the first domino. Then came Huntsville, then Parry Sound. By the time Sudbury and Thunder Bay were hit, the writing was on the wall. The beer store wasn't just shrinking, it was unraveling. This wasn't some mom-and-pop corner shop fading into obscurity. The beer store was a giant, a system born out of post-prohibition Ontario, designed not only to distribute alcohol, but to control it, tax it, and recycle it. Every empty can and bottle you returned, billions over the decades, was part of this machine. And suddenly, that machine is grinding to a halt. The closures aren't random, they're systematic. Once the Ford government tore up a $225 million contract with the beer store, the countdown began. That contract funded operations, staffing, and infrastructure. Without it, every store became a liability. Communities weren't given alternatives, they were handed a ticking bomb. And here's where the chaos deepens. Ontario's grand plan? Hand off alcohol sales and bottle returns to grocery and convenience stores. In theory, it sounds modern, flexible, even consumer-friendly, but in practice, it's a disaster waiting to explode. Take your local grocer. They're already stretched thin, managing food shortages, rising costs, and staff cuts. Now picture them handling truckloads of empties, sticky cans, and mountains of glass bottles. They don't have the facilities, they don't have the staff, and most importantly, they don't have the contracts or incentives that kept the beer store humming. The deposit return system, the pride of Ontario's recycling program, is on life support. For decades, the beer store quietly handled the dirtiest job in retail. You brought your empties, they processed them, and the province kept waste out of landfills. It worked. Ontario had some of the highest return rates in North America. That system doesn't just vanish overnight. It collapses, slowly at first, then all at once. Workers are already paying the price. Hundreds of unionized jobs are evaporating. These weren't minimum wage gigs. They were steady, decent-paying roles in communities that desperately needed them. For small towns, the beer store was more than a job site. It sponsored the local hockey team, it paid the rent of families who couldn't survive on seasonal tourism alone. When those doors lock, it's not just about losing access to beer, it's about losing a community pillar. And yet politicians in Toronto paint this as modernization. They claim people want more choice, more convenience. But choice means nothing if the system behind it collapses. Ask the average shopper if they'd rather walk into a shiny new grocery store to buy wine or walk into that same store to return 40 sticky beer bottles. The reality is obvious, most won't. Refunds will go unclaimed, recycling rates will plummet, and Ontario's landfills will pay the price.
This isn't fear-mongering, it's already happening. Grocers have quietly warned they're not prepared to take on the role. Some chains are openly suggesting they may refuse to participate. And if that happens, alcohol sales themselves become a risk. Imagine convenience stores pulling out entirely, refusing to stock alcohol because they can't deal with the tidal wave of returns. The province promised a seamless transition. What they delivered was a logistical nightmare. And looming over it all is Mark Carney, the polished so-called technocrat now sitting in the Prime Minister's chair. Instead of calming the waters, Carney looks like a man drowning in details he never bothered to understand. He can manage global finance, but can he manage beer bottles in Ontario? Right now, the answer looks like a humiliating no. But this was only the beginning. The deeper the closures spread, the more cracks appeared in Ontario's so-called modernization plan. And what happened next would shock everyone. The collapse wasn't contained to a handful of stores. By late fall, the wave of closures swept into southern Ontario, the population core. London, Kitchener, Oshawa, Hamilton. Each shutdown felt like another warning siren. The old system was disintegrating faster than anyone predicted. This is where the chaos turned personal. For decades, seniors relied on their local beer store not just to pick up their cases, but to cash in their empties. A routine chore became a source of dignity. They got their deposit back, no questions asked. Now those same seniors are being told to drag heavy bags into grocery stores that don't even have a plan for processing returns. Some towns are miles away from the nearest alternative. That refund money? It's disappearing into corporate limbo. Meanwhile, Ontario's vaunted recycling record is slipping. Numbers from the past year show a sharp decline in return rates. Fewer empties are being collected, more ending up in garbage bins. The entire deposit return promise is breaking down. Without the beer store's centralized infrastructure, the system fragments. No one knows where the glass and aluminum are going, or if they're even being recycled at all. And let's talk about the workforce. Every closure represents dozens of lost jobs. These were union positions that came with benefits, pensions, and stability. Gone. Replaced by precarious part-time shifts at grocery chains that pay barely above minimum wage. The ripple effect is brutal. Local sponsorships for kids' sports teams? Canceled. Community donations? Slashed. The beer store may have been a monopoly, but it gave back to the places it operated. The new model? Strip it down, privatize it, and let small towns fend for themselves. Premier Ford's government insists this was all about consumer choice, but it looks more like corporate deregulation dressed up as modernization. Instead of efficiency, Ontario has chaos. Instead of convenience, it has confusion. And instead of stability, it has uncertainty. The timeline is collapsing too. Originally, the province planned for a full transition by 2031, but with the beer store walking away faster than expected, the whole system could unravel years ahead of schedule. Imagine a province-wide alcohol shortage. Imagine grocers refusing to sell alcohol entirely because they can't handle the returns. That isn't modernization, that's sabotage.
And then there's the political theater. Mark Carney, the man touted as the steady hand guiding Canada through turbulent times, is now being painted as unsteady, temperamental, and overwhelmed. His reputation as a global financial genius doesn't translate into managing something as basic as beer sales and bottle returns. The more closures pile up, the worse his image becomes. The narrative isn't one of a strong leader, it's one of a man throwing tantrums as the system collapses under his watch. Critics are asking tough questions. Why wasn't there a detailed replacement plan for the deposit return program? Why were small towns left to fend for themselves? Why are billions in recyclable material now at risk of being lost to landfills? Each unanswered question chips away at Carney's credibility. The most damning part? This crisis was avoidable. Ontario had a functioning, stable system. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. With one political decision, the Ford government tore up a binding contract, and Carney failed to contain the fallout. The result is a mess that touches every corner of the province: consumers, workers, businesses, and municipalities. And the danger isn't confined to Ontario. Other provinces are watching closely. If this unraveling spreads, Canada's broader alcohol and recycling framework could fracture, triggering a national crisis. Imagine Alberta or British Columbia seeing Ottawa's weak handling of the issue and deciding to deregulate on their own terms. The dominoes don't just fall in Ontario, they fall across the country. What began as a few local closures has snowballed into a province-wide collapse. And now it's spilling into national politics, exposing a prime minister who looks less like a problem solver and more like a man in denial. But the story doesn't end here. The question now is simple. Can Canada salvage this before it spirals into total breakdown? Or will Carney's crisis management failures cement his downfall? Because the next phase of this disaster won't just be about beer. It will be about trust, leadership, and whether Canadians believe their government can manage even the basics. And the ending is far from optimistic. Ontario's beer store collapse isn't just about alcohol. It's about trust in leadership, broken contracts, and a system unraveling faster than anyone imagined. Communities are left scrambling, workers are abandoned, and a recycling program once envied across North America is slipping into chaos. And through it all, Mark Carney looks less like the polished technocrat he promised to be, and more like a politician flailing in the spotlight. The real question now isn't whether the beer store can be saved. It's whether Canada can survive this kind of reckless governance without deeper fractures. Because if something as basic as buying and recycling beer turns into a full-blown crisis, what happens when the stakes are even higher? This story is only just beginning, and if you want to keep uncovering the fallout, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep watching, because the next shock is already on its way.